Inflation. Denizens of social media will say it's very high. And if you disagree with them, like I have sometimes, they'll call you a jerk. They've called me a jerk. But what about if we did a survey, a professional survey of American citizens? What would they say? Obviously, they would agree on the latter. I'm a jerk. But what about inflation? Let's ask Jeff Snider, head of global research for Alhambra Investments. Jeff, our last article for episode 40, part 3, it's called Act 2, The Lie Unwinds. And you can find it posted at Alhambra Investments, and it was posted on December 11th. So Act 2, the Lie Unwinds, but the date that we're really interested in is May 17th. What happened on that day?
That was Act 1, right? If there's an Act 2, there has to be an Act 1. So what was Act 1? Act 1 was Jay Powell going on 60 Minutes and, as I've said repeatedly, lying his ass off. He was really brazen. I mean, it was completely, and I understand why he was doing it because, look, everything was really bad back then, and he wasn't really sure whether or not it's in his mind, the Federal Reserve Chairman always think back to 1929. And so they believe that, look, when the chips are down, you do whatever it takes to move everything back in the inflationary direction, including, apparently, you lie if you have to. And the big lie he told that day on 60 Minutes, knowing full well that he would never be challenged by any reporter because they're never challenged on any of these things. He basically said, look, we flooded the world with dollars. We just print it digitally. We create money digitally, and we can do it. We'll do it, and we're going to continue to do it. We're going to flood the world with dollars, this digital money printing. And he knew that he would set the news media afire, and social media would go nuts over this stuff. That's exactly what happened. Because here we had, for the first time in history, the Federal Reserve, a top central banker, actually saying these words. Look at me, I'm being reckless with the money printer. And he was doing it because we were in a deflationary situation, and a serious deflationary situation, which he agreed needed the most serious, at least what they had in their toolkit, serious methods to try to get out of it, which was, I got to go on 60 Minutes and lie. So that was Act 1.
It reminds, that whole sequence, it reminds me a little bit about The Sum of All Fears, which was a 2002 American movie of Tom Clancy book of the same title. And it starred Bridget Moynihan, and Ben Affleck and Morgan Freeman were in it too, but whatever. There was a scene where a rogue Russian general attacked an American aircraft carrier. And you know what the Russian president did? He went on the air on television, and it was rogue, so the Russian president didn't authorize it. He went on the air and he said, yeah, we did it because X, Y, and Z. And the thinking was, and this was the scene, it was worse to appear to not be in charge. The consequences were worse if you came out there and said, well, we don't really know what's going on. We don't know why this happened. And that's the sense I get from them. They have to put on this face. And you're not a bomb thrower. For the people that don't read your articles, you're not a bomb thrower. You don't use that word lightly, the lying. You were very explicit. You were very upset with what he had done.
You got it exactly right here, because monetary policy has no money in it. Instead, it's all about expectations policy. And expectations policy is exactly what you just described. Hey, it's a big show of we're in charge. We've got this situation covered. You don't believe me? Can't you hear the digital printing press in the background going brr, brr, brr? That's what he was saying. He's like, look, we've got this under control. Even though in the middle of May, that was already, a couple months into this massive QE stuff, and things weren't really turning around all that well. So, if you were paying attention, you already knew things weren't going the right way, and that's one of the reasons why Powell was on TV. But in his audience, by and large, were people who were paying close attention, because there just aren't that many people who pay close attention. Most people just want to know, hey, what's going on here? And what they see in 60 Minutes, and of course 60 Minutes has all the trappings of establishment and authoritativeness. Look, everything's, this is big stuff, and the right people and the smart people, the best and brightest in the world. And unchallenged, the guy says, look, we're printing money, there'll be inflation. And they're supposed to just believe it.
I liked one of the points you made in this article is that to all appearances, what the Fed was doing was drastic. And you'll see that in the media or podcasts anywhere. What they did was drastic. But the point you make is no, it wasn't drastic. It was the same old, same old. Just the numbers were bigger. It wasn't drastic at all. Let's talk about the salt of the earth. The average person has real responsibilities, can't be following the economic news day to day. They are surveyed by the Michigan survey of American consumers. We talked about that last week. But there's also another survey done by the Federal Reserve Board of New York. No, Federal Reserve branch of New York. And they've been doing this survey for about 7 years of consumers among many various topics, including is the stock market going to go up? And they ask them about inflation. And at the beginning of this week, what day was it? I don't remember. Whatever the beginning of this week was, the 11th or the 12th, they released, on December 11th, they released a short and long-term outlook for inflation expectations. Tell us what you saw. And I'm going to pull up a graph of them, all right?
Well, first of all, let's go back to Act 1. When in May 2018 or May 2020, when Jay Powell went on 60 Minutes and the digital money printing, you saw that phrase everywhere. As you pointed out, Emil, it was widely. People went crazy with this because, again, that was the whole entire point. And so we saw in these consumer surveys for inflation expectations, especially in the short run, is they bumped up a bit. I think the University of Michigan survey got up as high as 3%, which was the highest in a little bit here, a little bit over a year, which kind of suggested that, if you're Jay Powell, you're thinking this might have worked. This seemed to have done well. And as you're pointing, I think this is, the FRBNY survey of inflation, same kind of thing. You saw this rise in May 2020 coinciding with Powell's appearance on 60 Minutes, which was consumers saying, okay, the guy says he's printing money, he's flooding the world with cash and dollars and whatever else. We don't know, so must be the case, right? And so people tend to believe when a Fed chairman goes on a reputable news program and says he's doing these things, they thought he was doing these things. And as we know from history, right, money printing always leads to inflation. So if there's going to be lots of money printing, there has to be lots of inflation. That's the association at the heart of all of this stuff.
And then so there's another bullet point I list out there. It was August of 2020, and that's when they announced, the Federal Reserve, that they're going to let inflation run hot above 2% for some indefinite period of time. And
with people not understanding that was borrowing from the Japanese from 4 years earlier, their overshooting policy, which didn't work there. But again, the Fed doesn't care, right? The Fed, their audience is to people who don't know that, and they're basically saying, look, we're printing money hand over fist. It's digital. It's brand new. It's great and massive. It's in the trillions. And oh, by the way, we don't care about inflation anymore. We're going to let it go as far as it needs to go. So, the layperson, John Q. Public, the person on the street, has got to be thinking, well, this stuff has got to be really inflationary. Except in the data that you're showing, or the University of Michigan survey, not really, not so much, right?
Well, and even in this one too, what I'm showing is the New York branch survey. It shows that the $3 trillion expansion in their balance sheet this year got them above their 7-year trend, and the trend was down, and it's gotten them a little bit. The $3 trillion doesn't go as far as one would think. That's the 1 year ahead. I'm showing the 3 year ahead now, Jeff. Is there any difference in the 3 year versus the 1 year?
Yeah, and really that's where it should show up. If the Fed was at all being successful in what it was doing, we would expect, yes, in short-run inflation expectations to rise, but that's not really what the Fed wants, and that's not what we really want either. We want this to become more than just a flash in the pan. We don't want just a sharp burst of inflation and then it goes back down to normal, or which would mean no burst of inflation. We want this stuff to become sustainable, because we're really not talking about inflation and consumer prices. We're talking about the economic and monetary background behind them, which would be conducive to growth, sustainable growth and acceleration because of a sustained increase in the monetary system. Inflationary money leading to positive economic outcomes. And if those inflation expectations extend beyond the short run, extend beyond the 1 year horizon, that means that consumers are buying into the story. They're saying, okay, Jay Powell's printing money. It's going to be inflationary. It's going to be good that means the economy start moving again. And we're starting to believe this stuff, that it's not just going to flash in the pan, that it's going to extend over our visible horizon into the longer terms. So we would really want to see longer run inflation expectations rise even more than shorter run. And again, outside of the Act One short-term kind of a boost, it really it was a little bit of a bump, and then what?
Yeah, it's not worth $3 trillion in balance sheet expansion.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because really these numbers are huge, right? And the rate of increase, or the level of increase just this year is, $1.5 trillion or whatever it was. I mean, these are supposed to be huge numbers. And when this is all you got from huge numbers, you're already starting to think, hey, something's not right here. Consumers may not know, the nuts and the bolts and the details. You're going back to Lehman Brothers, Koliada, all this other stuff, but they sure can see in their own lives that this stuff isn't leading to what everybody's told. And in the University of Michigan survey, of course, the inflation expectations recently have been even worse. The 1 year inflation expectation in December flat out flopped. It was down to 2.3% again, which is basically where it was in March and April, among the lowest in series history. The longer run expectations from the University of Michigan, the 5 year rates, they only went up a little bit, and they stayed up through September, and now they're back down again amongst the lowest in the survey's history. When the survey's history isn't new, like FRB and Y stuff. The University of Michigan has been conducting these inflation surveys going back to 1978 or 79, somewhere in there, late 70s. So we're talking about 40 some odd years of inflation, consumer surveys and inflation expectations, among the lowest in history, in that entire history, despite $3 trillion in quote unquote money printing, and Jay Powell on 60 Minutes telling everybody around the world that they're flooding the system with digital money printing. It doesn't add up.
And, often people tell us that there is inflation. And that's not what we're saying, that there's no inflation. We're just saying that the kind of inflation that exists when an economy is expanding rapidly doesn't seem to be present. And people will say, well, it's not in the government's interest to show it in the numbers because they owe more money if inflation goes up. And that's fair. But what these surveys show is that, the people are told that there's a waterfall of money flowing out of the Federal Reserve. Well, they're not buying it. At least it's not filtering out into the rest of their economy. Jeff, is there anything that we didn't cover on this article that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think that's really the point, is that people may believe what they see on TV, at least in terms of the wording, right? Yes, the Fed is money printing because we don't know what else it's doing. The level of bank reserves are rising. But at the same time, we don't see the consequences. We don't see the economy rapidly or in this case, rapidly recovering, because look, let's face it, we're already in the recession. We're in a serious recession as it is now. And people are saying in consumer expectations, as well as, other things like we talked about before, consumer credit, spending, all these other indications, consumers and businesses are saying, okay, we don't really know what the Fed does. They say they're money printing. Maybe that's true, but we're sure not seeing the supposed consequences of it in our daily lives. And that actually makes it even more difficult, because you're throwing a wedge between causation and consequence, right? Because we're not able to understand why things are falling apart, or why things are not working the way they are, because we don't really know what these people are up to. And in getting back to our overall theme of the show, the people who are supposed to know what's going on in the system, they have no idea either, which is why it all gets back to this ridiculous drama about, why does Jay Powell have to go on 60 Minutes and lie? Because he has no idea what happened with Lehman Brothers. It really is that simple. If the Federal Reserve had any money in monetary policy, had any kind of monetary competence, we wouldn't have to go through this expectations crap, which is essentially, in this case, because things were so bad this year, expectations meant the Federal Reserve Chairman, for the first time, had to openly lie about what he did on television.
Well, Jeff, as I said earlier in the show, this is our 40th episode of the year and final episode of the year. And I just wanted to thank you here publicly for this journey. I've absolutely loved it. Sometimes when the camera is off, I'll get down because I'll think, oh, Regis Philbin would have said it better, and Ryan Seacrest, he's so much more handsome than I am. But overall, I absolutely love it. I can't wait to continue again next year and see where this journey takes us. I'm thrilled to see the enthusiasm in the audience. I don't think you get out there as much on social media and into the YouTube comments and on Twitter as much as I do, but people are really enthusiastic. They're loving what you're sharing with us, Jeff. And as I've told you before in the audience, I believe you've got a unified theory of what's happened over these last 13 years and where we may be going in the future. So I can't wait to do it again next year, and I'll take more beauty naps, and maybe I'll look into how Seacrest cuts his hair and try to improve that way.
Yeah, I think one of the things to me, and I can't thank you enough, Emil, for taking the time out of your own personal schedule and your own work schedule to do this with me, to put together this on a weekly basis, which takes quite a bit of effort. And I think that's one of the things, looking forward to next year, one of the things that's really been a positive development from my own perspective is that people are asking questions. Going back to 2008, there were people were willing to swallow what everybody was saying, central bankers in particular, and hey, they're money printing, whatever. Nowadays, people are a little more skeptical. There's a lot more people thinking, okay, even if they don't believe what I'm saying, if they don't believe what you're saying, Emil, they're at least thinking, well, something's up here. We notice that something's wrong, and people are starting to move in the direction towards skepticism. Okay, Jay Powell says he's printing money, but is he really? What are these bank reserves? What really goes on in the monetary system? Is it really that easy and simple? There seems to be a whole lot more to the story, and there's a level of interest in exploring that story, even if you don't take our word for it. The fact that people are willing to put the time and effort into thinking through these things on their own, to me says let's keep going, let's keep pushing this forward, and let's get people asking questions and becoming skeptical and start thinking about things in a more realistic way.
I'll talk to you in 2021, Jeff.
Okay, Emil, take care. Happy New Year, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all that stuff.
Absolutely.